we have an attorney that is in an office next to us back at our home office, and I went into his office the other day, and there's just boxes and boxes of paper everywhere, and so but there are advisors that are like that,
right?
And if you're a buyer, you're looking at that going, oh, no way. I'm not going to, I don't know what.
Organized chaos in their mind.
Well, yeah, in their mind, organized chaos.
Or just chaos.
To me, it was just chaos.
Welcome to Advisor Talk with Frank LaRosa. Brought to you by Elite Consulting Partners, it's the only podcast offering unfiltered guidance and direct advice for all things concerning financial advisors, RIAs, and the practitioners in the wealth management business. Learn more and subscribe today at eliteconsultingpartners.com/podcast. And now, here's your host, Frank LaRosa.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Advisor Talk with Frank LaRosa. I am your host, Frank LaRosa, and joined by my lovely co-host, Vanna White. No, I'm just kidding. Stacey, Frank.
I thought it was Regis and Kelly. No, they're over too.
They're way gone, right?
Oh,
at least they're right.
Well, happy to be back.
Happy to be back.
Yes.
Anyway, it's one of those long first podcast after a long weekend,
right.
So excuse the giggles. Anyway, welcome back to the show. We are super excited today as we record this sort of after Memorial Day weekend. We want to sort of acknowledge those that have laid down their lives and fought for our country and our freedom. So thank you for that, and thank you for their service.
Thanks for your service.
And thank you very much. But one of the reasons why I wanted to do this topic today is because, over the weekend and you think about these things, you sort of think about like your legacy and what is it and where, your future, right? I don't want to say anything about sort of death a little bit, but you think about your future. And so today I want to really talk about your future as a financial advisor and your ability to and your desire and thoughts on selling your business. I know we talk about this all the time, right? But I don't think we've really talked about a couple of the tactics on how to build a practice to sort of attract premium buyers, right? We've talked a little bit about different topics, do's and don'ts, but we never really sort of put it down like we're going to put it down today, and sort of, the steps to create, the better valuation for your business, building what's called a transferable business, right, or transferable value in the minds of a buyer, and then really common red flags, sort of do's and don'ts that scare buyers away. And then sort of what you should be thinking about if you're 3 to 5 years out. And I made it interesting. I had another recording I did on something similar, and I talked about the 80-20 rule, which we'll get into. So I'm not gonna give it away.
Well, I think one of the things that we hear quite often, and it's easy to be enticed by, what's the multiple? What's the valuation? What's the money I'm going to get? And that is a natural, like we're sensitive to that, but we want to make sure that when you are, over weekends or time away from your business, thinking about succession and finding the right buyer, that it's not just about, and I just literally got off a call right before this, not just about the money grab, the monetization, because that's one pillar of it.
Yeah.
And I think this podcast will talk about all those things that you should really be cognizant of.
So the first one that we want to talk about, right, is this idea of sort of valuation factors, right, that buyers look at. And the first one is recurring revenue versus advisory revenue versus transactional business revenue, right? And so they're different. Obviously, we all know what transaction revenue is, right? Stocks, bonds, buying and selling, front-loaded annuities, things like that. But I think a lot of advisors get the definition or the idea between, they say, well, I'm 80% recurring revenue. Yeah, but if half of that is mutual fund trails and 12B1 fees and annuities, that's not the same thing as advisory revenue. And so when you're looking at your business, understand that advisory revenue carries a different multiple than recurring revenue does, right? So typically what we see with advisory revenue, it's going to be anywhere between, I'll say 3.5 to 4.5. Maybe you can get a 5. Top line revenue.
Top line.
Yeah, let's define
Gross
that. We are
revenue.
not talking about on an EBITDA number or an EBOC number or there's all
Like
these
things
different
after
multiples.
expenses. Like we're
Right.
not referring to.
We're
it's
talking
the
about top line revenue, right?
top of the top.
You can boil that down to, well, what is the equivalent of EBITDA? We're not going to get into that conversation right now. For simplicity purposes, we're just going to talk about multiples on top line revenue. How much revenue do you bring in the front door? And so advisory revenue, so managed money, typically gets anywhere between 3.5 to 4.5, maybe even 5, depending on how you're doing it. Depending if you're doing it versus outsourcing it to money managers or third-party asset managers, those types of things. So you have to think about, what does your business look like there? That's one factor, right? And obviously, I know it goes without saying, but the more advisory business you have, the higher the multiple you're going to get in your practice. And then we'll get into red flags about why it's not always wise for you to be managing your own client's assets, right? Which is a huge mistake that advisors make, but I understand. Number two, and this is, you've had a lot of experience with this, and that is understanding the client demographics in your book of business. So client demographics and then retention metrics, right? So we talk about client demographics. Are all your clients in one location? Are all, with city, state, right? Or are they spread out around the country? If they're all in one location, it limits the buyers that may have interest in your practice. And if you limit the number of buyers, you ultimately limit the final
Your
offer.
choices.
Your
Right.
choices, right?
Flexibility.
And it's about, I won't say a bidding war, but right now it's a little bit of a bidding war for quality practices that are for sale. So if you have clients that are spread out throughout the country, you have a higher probability of attracting a more I'll call it a premium buyer.
More selection.
More selection.
More choice.
Like a premium buyer, though we use the word premium buyer, is someone that has acquired practices before. They have the capital ready to go. They know what the model is. They also have a way of integrating the new business into their business so that the retention of those clients is very high.
Well, they have a process.
Right.
They have, who does what, who does what as the clients are coming in, who's courting the seller, the person that's retiring, who's doing those specific things.
Yeah.
Because that matters.
Yeah, who's taking care of the clients, making sure that the transition goes smoothly. All of the things, we're not going to talk about that today, but excuse me. So buyers look for, what are your demographics? Are you focused on a certain type of client? Do you have mass affluent clients versus high net worth clients? Because there are some buyers that really don't want mass affluent, right? Because there's a ton of accounts, ton of smaller accounts. That's just not their bread and butter. Maybe they have a platform that is alternatives and more sophisticated products, and so they want books of business that those clients can take advantage of the products that are being offered by the buyer. So you have to look at all of those things. So it's really just important to understand what your practice looks like. And then we talk like client, like retention metrics. And I know we've talked about this in the past, but you had a situation where you were involved with a seller and sort of at the last minute he bailed because he felt like his client retention was going to not be good, right? Because of their service, their sort of their service offering.
Well, he had a lot of older clients, and that was one of the other points that I was going to bring up before, is the age of his clients and also the amount of connection and the frequency of connection that he had with them. And there's obviously ways, and we're not going to get into that now, but that is a major, major deterrent for certain buyers if your entire practice is, filled with, 80 and 9-year-old clients. There's nothing wrong with that, but if you have the multi-generational clients along with that, that's one thing. But if it's just, clients in that older age bracket, there's definitely a consideration there.
And especially when you aren't communicating with those clients on a frequent basis.
It's twofold, right?
Right, which was part of the issue. And that gets into sort of infrastructure. So this sort of was like an infrastructure statement, right? Because this particular advisor who run a multi-million-dollar business, and by the way, was still getting a very good number. I'm almost like to say the number that they were asking for. But infrastructure is really important because when you're selling your practice, the buyer wants to know that there's going to be as little attrition as possible. So your technology stack, right? Meaning how well are you using technology? Sometimes you don't have a choice because depending on where you're at, you may be given the technology that you have and that's all you use. But are you using it effectively? Are you using it to be compliant, right? So do you have good compliance records? Do you have a process and a system in place using technology that makes that very easy and an easier lift for a buyer to pick up versus, like I envision a room full of we have an attorney that is in an office next to us back at our home office. And I went into his office the other day and there's just boxes and boxes of paper everywhere. And so, but there are advisors that are like that.
Right.
And if you're a buyer, you're looking at that going, oh, no way. I'm not going to, I don't know what.
Organized chaos in their mind.
Well, yeah, in their mind, organized chaos.
Or just chaos.
To me, it was just chaos. And so, to me, that shows that not really being compliant ready, right? Because you don't know if you're going to get an audit, what that's going to be like. And the buyer's going to be terrified of that. So making sure that as much technology as you can use as possible. And then the other component is the staff structure, which is really important. You were working with another case that sort of, I think that blew up more from an emotional thing about giving up control. But, the seller was very interested in making sure that the staff stayed in place, and you found buyers that were equally interested. And the reason why they were willing to pay the multiple that they were going to pay is because the staff was going to stay on, right? And so having staff that stays on after you leave is really important. Not all the time, but a lot of times.
Well, for the seamless transition of the client relationship.
Right.
That staff may have been with those certain clients for 20, 30 years.
Right.
And so there's a significant level of just connection between the current staff and the buyer coming in.
It's a huge relationship.
Hey, come meet my new advisors. Oh, and by the way, you're not going to be speaking to the same person that you've been speaking with for 20, 30 years.
Right.
Too much disruption all at once.
Right.
But over time, that could happen, but just not all at once.
Right. So from a buyer's perspective, when you look at professional buyers, they generally like to have a staff that stays on, to your point, for at least a period of time.
Yeah, minimum 12 to 18 months.
Yeah, because they want to transition.
Minimum.
And so when you look at the things that add the most value to creating value, if that makes sense, adding the most value to creating value, right? It's advisory versus brokerage and recurring, which we all know, I get it. But it's client demographics, understanding your client demographics, and understanding your retention metrics, right? So can you articulate what those retention metrics are? Do you have a system and a process in place to retain your clients, a service system, all that stuff? Technology, how well are you using technology? Compliance, how compliant is your practice and your system, and how good is your staff? Those are the three areas.
I just want to add one other piece, because I've sort of run into this situation as well, is flexibility of the seller in terms of how they run their clients' money. Because I've seen situations where we've gone years trying to find the right buyer and thinking that, they're just not the right buyer out there. But in reality, he's not a great seller at the moment.
Right.
Because there's so much pushback on, this is how we run our business. This is how we expect the next person to come in and run our business. And that's all our clients know, period, the end. And it was that level of, resistance of the seller to make any change, when in reality, in 3 to 5 years, that they're not going to be there anyway. So it was sort of this push-pull conversation.
Yeah, right. It's interesting enough. I was going to cover that on sort of like some of the red flags that buyers look at.
Oh, I skipped ahead.
And that was one of them. That's okay.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay. And that is really the too much dependency on the principal, the founders, in terms of running the money, running the business, right? The brand component of it, right? In that case, it was very much about running the money, which we've talked about a lot. And so we'll just talk about that, right? Because it's also part of building transferable value, right? So we call it building transferable value. How do you transfer the value of what you have today to a new buyer? And a lot of advisors, especially those that are in the market to sell their practices, because they're typically in their, I'll just say early 60s, late 60s, early 70s, right? Most of them, for the majority of their careers, not their whole career, but for the majority of their career, started off in the business when there was no such thing as advisory, right? Or it wasn't as readily known, right?
It was all mutual funds.
It was mutual funds. It was trading stocks and running money yourself. And so they're used to that. They run their models. They're proud of them, like that client.
Yeah.
Super proud of them.
Yeah.
So much so to a detriment, in my opinion, to the clients. Because in that case, he is older. The son is younger, but really doesn't even like the business.
Right.
Like,
right. Know your G2.
Know your G2. Like he doesn't really, which is actually another red flag, right? So you must have, you're cheating.
No, I don't even have
Are
my
you looking
glasses
at my notes?
I can't see.
So we'll get to that one in a second.
Right.
But this is a hot topic because it's contrary to what most advisors think, and that is, well, I'm unique and my business is unique because I run my own money. Well, congratulations. It's costing you probably millions of dollars in valuation because nobody else can repeat what you're doing for the most part when you're gone. I know they say, well, it's a very simple model to follow. To you it is. Mm-hmm. But to someone else coming in, it's not.
Well, and what we think this really is, let's get to the psychology of it, is that it's a big decision. It's one that they've probably been thinking about, and now here we are at the altar having to make a decision, and the excuse is, but I need somebody to replicate exactly what I've been doing in the last 30 to 40 years, when they know that is somewhat unrealistic, unreasonable.
It's unreasonable.
Right.
It's unreasonable because nobody thinks like that particular advisor thinks. So when they look at a stock position or a stock report or whatever they want, whatever the research that they're looking at, the new buyer is not going to read it the same way he's been reading it for 40 years.
Right.
Or really, it's like 50 years. I think he's old, so he's.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the message is don't let that be a
80s.
stall factor.
Right.
Because, don't be afraid of change, because the change can actually be better for your clients and your G2 long term.
Yeah, I mean, and I look at it like, so if you don't do anything and something does happen, which will happen eventually, it'll happen to all of us, right? How are your clients affected? Now all of a sudden, it's this new change and new solution is thrust upon your practice, thrust upon your staff, thrust upon your clients, in a fire drill.
Yeah, you're making decisions in an urgent way versus a more thought-provoking way.
So we talk about another one of the common since we jumped over my second session. Another red flag that buyers have is the issue with your G2, lack thereof, or someone that's not very strong, right? And in this case, with this particular client, I don't think the G2 was very strong. We used to joke that basically the dad would sell the practice, and then the son would take his piece of the business and they'll go run naked through the woods. So that's really what he wanted to do. Yeah, I don't care. It's my podcast. I'll say whatever I want.
It's my podcast.
You don't like it? Turn it off. I don't care.
Well, it just shows how we're not really scripted. I didn't expect you to say that.
Yeah. But the point was if I was a buyer, I wouldn't want to pay top dollar. Like they were paying almost $14 million for that practice.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have wanted to pay $14 million knowing that was the guy that I was going to rely on my investment. I was shocked they even got that kind of money.
Yeah. Well, and when I'm talking with advisors myself, one of the questions I say to them or statements is, if I was one of your clients, which I'm not, but if I was, I would want to know what's the plan, especially if my advisor was, approaching that age of sort of that last phase of their business. Let's face it, mid-60s, early 70s. And there's plenty of advisors that are not ready to give up the reins. Yeah. And we understand that's been your whole life. It's been your purpose. It's your livelihood. It's your relationships. It's all those things. But you're doing yourself, your family, and your clients. And if I was your client, I would want to know. So we're just here to sort of help talk through those things, like we were saying before, in not a fire drill situation. That's the point.
Right. Good point.
Thanks. And I can't read your notes.
That's okay. So the other thing, which is a red flag, is when we talk about technology. So like sloppy data, right? if I'm a buyer and I'm looking for information on your practice and you email me a bunch of spreadsheets that your assistant got and it took him or her a week to get because all the information is in different places, to me that's a red flag. I don't really know what I'm buying, and not that I think that you're making the data up, but maybe you're making it up, right? Versus dashboards and reports that come out of Salesforce or come out of some other system, or a clean QuickBooks account, right? Hey, give me your P&L for the last 3 years and give me your balance sheet for the last 3 years. Really, 5 years is what most large-scale institutional buyers are looking for. And so if you're doing it the right way, that should take you all of about 15, 20 minutes to get a report together, right? And so you need to be making sure that you're working with a good accountant to make sure your data is clean on the financial side, but then also with your CRM system, do you have all your client information in a CRM system, or is it in your assistant's notebook because she's been with you for 40 years and she just has the book, and the book, I quote in air quotes if you're not watching us on YouTube, the book has all of the information on your clients, because I've actually seen that.
I just had a conversation last week, and I meant to tell you that when we were talking about, because we provide database management solutions,
right,
talking about it, and the advisor literally said, I'm not a good client because I have everything in my notebook. And I thought he was joking. And he wasn't.
Right.
And I can't make this up. That's an extreme case.
Super
Most
dangerous.
don't do that. But the point is, he had no clue about the organization of his data, the cleanliness of the data, or any way to show it to anybody that might be a potential buyer, but he needs one. It's a little bit of an oxymoron going on
here.
Yeah, so.
Right. But just think about that. Like, if something happened to him, how does their spouse or significant other or estate handle that? They're not going to. So the book is basically going to to evaporate into thin air.
Yeah, I don't want to say it's laziness, or maybe it's a level of disorganization.
No,
but
it's laziness.
That's what we're here for.
I'll call a spade, right? As I say all the time, I call balls and strikes. It's laziness.
Okay, there you go.
Because it takes a little bit of work to put that stuff in the system, and then it takes work to continue to use it ongoing. And so that's that inconsistent billing. If you're an RIA, if you're individual practice and you're billing your clients, you work for a large institution, the billing should be pretty accurate. But even with that, I've seen large firms that are very poor at billing clients and charging the advisors accurately on their admin fees, on their ticket charges. If you're an OSJ or you have a bunch of advisors underneath you, you need to check your numbers, because a lot of firms aren't really good at charging you what they're supposed to be charging you, and then they leave it up to you to find the mistakes. And if you don't find the mistakes, guess who keeps the money? And most of the time, 9 times out of 10, the mistake is never in your favor. Mm-hmm. Almost always never in your favor. So most firms don't really, not that they don't care, but their philosophy is, we're going to do it the way we do it. And, we think it's accurate, but if it's not, it's up to you to figure that stuff out. And so proper billing, proper accounting, all of that ties in together, making sure you understand what your real revenue is, what your real gross margins are, what your real net margins are. I call it above the line and below the line. So above the line is like the charges that your firm charges you, whether it's admin fees, ticket charges, technology stack fees, all of those things. Operational expenses, right? Not the local stuff. You should be paying attention to that too. But a lot of firms who are buying practices on top line revenue don't really care how you're running your local business, right? Because as a business owner, you're running things through the business that are yours. You've taken some liberties there, so they don't really care. They don't want to be involved. They want top line cash flow is really what they're looking for. So one of the things that I want to move back to building a transferable value. We talk about the client segmentation, and one of the things that I was bringing up earlier today was this whole idea of an 80-20, right? And if you can identify the 20% of your clients that generate 80% of the revenue, so just follow me for a second here. So 20% of your clients that generate 80% of your revenue, which is that Pareto principle, which most practices I see still hold true to, right? That's really important. And it gets into the whole mass affluent versus high net worth clients, right? But the next step of that, what you should do is then you take the 80%. So it's the reverse. So take the 80% that only generate 20% of the revenue, right? And now follow me here. It's going to lose you for a second because I lost myself when I first saw this.
Well, it's the 80-20 rule.
Right, but then you take the 80% that's generating 20% of the revenue, so the opposite, and figure out of that 80%, who are the 20% in that group that are generating 80% of that 20%.
I get it.
And that's the group, and then you want to keep them, and you want to get rid of everybody else.
So it's like your...
Or you can do it one more time, and that becomes your A, B, and C book.
Right. So it's like your A minus, B plus, and...
Or A, B, and C.
A, B, and C clients.
Yeah, we don't have to be... There's no pluses.
It's like, well, trying to make it... you're really taking the elite of each group versus the bottom tier clients.
Right. You're exactly. You're taking the 20% of each of those groups that generate 80% of the revenue in each of those groups. So whether it's platinum, gold, silver, whatever the book segmentation is, that's the way you should do it. So basically, again, you take the first A. Your A group is the 20% of the clients that generate 80% of your revenue. The next group is 20% of the rest of those clients that generate 80% of the B revenue, and then 20% of the C clients that generate 80% of the C revenue. That's how you do it. And when you can articulate that to a buyer, that's very powerful because now they know what they're working with. They know, like, okay, so there's actually a lot of opportunity in that B book because we can move some of those people up with better products, better service, right? A lot of times, if you're an advisor and you're thinking about selling your practice, and we see this often, way too often, you've basically stopped marketing. You've basically stopped asking for referrals. You basically get referrals begrudgingly, right? So when you can show a buyer that you have client segmentation, that you have a service model built into that client segmentation, you have a team that's been used to executing on that client segmentation, and you have a workflows and processes surrounding that client segmentation, now you have a transferable business, one that adds a lot of value. You've created transferable value to the buyer. That's what you have to be doing.
And you're building credibility to the buyer. The seller actually has to sell themselves to the buyer to prove that it's a transparent business, and they're building credibility and proof that it's a business where you have strong relationships. That's a big one.
Yep.
And a growth trajectory.
Right.
That's a tongue twister.
So,
growth trajectory.
So we talk about that, and so the last thing really is like, hey, this is great, Frank, but I'm 10 years out, or I'm 7 years out, or I'm 2 years out. Like, when should I be thinking about these things? So the question I had to ask was, if I want to work on some of these things, if I haven't done any of these things, when should I start? And I referenced it a little bit before, that most real buyers, premium buyers, are looking for someone that's been preparing to do this for at least 5 years. Because the systems, the processes, the service models, the client segmentation, the clients are used to all of those things because it's been 5 years, right? They can look at retention rates, right? If you're only looking at the last 2 years, well, how do they know that you didn't just bring on all those clients, and how long are they to stay? So 5 years is when you should start thinking about setting yourself up to sell, even if you don't ultimately end up selling. And so I'm making the analogy that what you find out is, not really an analogy, but a fact statement, that if you start doing this 5 years out, when you're 3 years into it, you probably have a much better business, and you're probably having more fun, you're probably making more money, getting more clients, referrals, and then you decide, maybe I don't want to sell, which is one of the reasons why you should start doing this 5 years out, because you might be surprised with what you find. And so, but you should be thinking about this if you're within 5 years. And my rule of thumb, like, if you're at home, which is sort of where this whole thing came from over the long weekend, if you're at home and you're thinking about your future and you're thinking about, like, the idea of retirement, if that is in your mind today, that's, I'm going to get a little preachy on everybody right now, that's basically God telling you need to start thinking about this. If you're thinking about it, it's in your gut. If you listen to any of my other podcasts, you know that my philosophy on your sort of gut instinct is it's God talking to you. And so if you're thinking about it at all, it's crossing your mind, it's God whispering that you should be focusing on this as part of your sort of your business.
I heard a statement over the weekend of a podcast I listened to where your feelings don't lie.
Yeah, well,
They
it's
don't
God
lie.
talking to you.
Even if you're not aware, even if it's subconscious, eventually those feelings come through. They're truthful.
Feelings, gut instinct,
Yes.
it's all that
Absolutely.
stuff. And the reality is, and again, I'm going to get preachy here, but this is really how I believe, how I think, it's God whispering to you in your gut, right? Do it, or don't do it, or think about it. Like, you should be thinking about this, or this is not comfortable. You shouldn't be doing this, or don't hire that person. Like that, I literally operate my life that way. And so if you're thinking about retirement, or it's coming up in conversation with your spouse, significant other, with your kids, whatever it is, that is telling you should be doing these things. And so we see so many people. We have a situation right now with our M&A firm where the advisor, I want to say I think it's a cancer issue. I don't remember what part, but
medical
it's a
situation.
medical
Okay.
issue. Serious, like less than 12 months to live. And he hasn't done anything. And so now we're going to find a solution for him, which is great, but he's sort of doing it quickly, right? It's like speed dating. And the reality is, even though we're trying to do a really good job at getting him the best value we can, it's discounted because it's a pretty bad diagnosis.
Well, there's medical uncertainty.
So I'm saying 12 months
Yeah.
is probably less than 12 months. Right?
Yeah. And so to someone that's buying that book of business, what's the longevity or the strength of the relationship they can build in a short period of time with the clients
it's
to
much
retain
lower.
them?
Right, it's much
I think
lower.
that's the concern.
And so we see it all the time. And at least this individual is doing something about it right away. We've seen also other situations where somebody passes suddenly. And now we're dealing with the firm and or the spouse who's coming to us to say, can you help me get something for this book of business? And it's near impossible to do, let alone get any money up front. And then there's some rules and regulations around whether or not even a non-registered spouse can even receive commissions.
I've seen what's happened
after the fact.
I've seen what's happened with an unlicensed spouse, an unlicensed assistant, and I'm not trying to like paint like the worst case scenario, but those scenarios actually exist, and it's really hard. A lot of attorneys, a lot of legality that goes into it, a lot of emotion of, oh, I didn't know. Well, be in the driver's seat. We work with us and your team to make sure that you're way ahead of the game, even if it's 5-8 years out.
Yeah,
I can't stress that enough.
Yeah, and that's our message here today, right? Is be in the driver's seat, take control of the business. Do not put your head in the sand. It's the worst thing that you can do is put your head in the sand, or maybe not put your head in the sand because maybe your ego is too big and it won't fit in the sand. It won't happen to me, right? I'm in a mood today.
Wow. Okay.
But I see a lot of people that say, well, it's not going to happen to me, or I'm not worried about that.
I'm busy. Not the right time. And I actually just said this to a client today.
I'm too busy. I got another round of golf I got to play.
Right. Or the weekend, the vacation. There's the good news and the bad news is that there will never be the perfect time.
Right.
I promise. And I'm here to put a stamp of approval on. There will never be the right time. So that's why the right time is now, sooner than later.
Sooner than later. And again, if you're thinking about it, if you're thinking about it, or it's in your gut about you doing it, you're losing sleep at night, there's a reason why you're starting to think about it. So do not disregard that. I'm telling you, do not disregard that. It'll come back and bite you in the ass a little bit. So anyway, if you want to talk about that more, I know that was sort of doom and gloom, but this is really important.
No,
we're very passionate about this.
It's real conversations.
Because it's real conversations.
Right.
You're not going to hear this in the context that we bring it to you any other place. We move hundreds. Last year we moved 198 individual advisors, meaning unique advisor moves, right? We are the biggest in the industry. We see so much stuff all across the country with all different types of firms, all different size advisors, from multi-billion-dollar teams and groups to small individual producers, terminated advisors, spouses, that are coming to us because their spouse died, had a heart attack, had an aneurysm or something, disability issues. we've seen it all. And so our goal here is to really just educate you all on what you should be thinking about. Take some time to think about this. If you don't know where to start, give us a call. We're happy to help you. If you're thinking about selling or you just want to understand the process, we have sort of a sort of owner readiness sort of program we can bring you through that helps you set some things up, and we consult with you on these things. We get you basically right-size your business in terms of setting you up in the right direction. And basically they give it to you and then you can run it. But we can do that for you because it's super, super, super important.
Yeah, we have all the resources right here at our fingertips.
Yeah, right. So,
that's the message.
And including valuation, right? We can get you a valuation. It's a little bit costly because it's a legitimate valuation. It's not like some rinky-dink spreadsheet that somebody gives you and charges a couple $grand for it. These are accredited valuations that you can use in estate planning. You can use, not a bad idea if you are thinking about selling and you have a pretty valuable business, to have that done in preparation, so you at least you're an educated seller. I know we're talking about educated buyers here, but you want to be an educated seller. So with that said, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Hopefully, if you have any questions, you can give Stacey a call at
856-816-6322 or Stacey at eliteconsultingpartners.com. Stacey, don't forget the E. Or Frank at
eliteconsultingpartners.com. 856-316-4651, but just call Stacey because I'm just going to have her take the call anyway.
You did this.
She's way better than I am. Or don't forget my Instagram account, which is franklarosa.elite. Check us out there, 267,000 followers. It's continuing to grow, so I appreciate the following. And thanks for watching. I appreciate your loyalty and appreciate the questions, the comments, the calls, the emails we get are super exciting and make us feel great that we are doing something really, really good and really just paying it forward to the community. So
drives us every day. Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Advisor Talk with Frank LaRosa. If you're looking for more advice or solutions on any topics in the financial services industry, or you just want to subscribe to our podcast, head on over to eliteconsultingpartners.com/podcasts.